The plasma storm screamed at Lyra Kane, slamming against the hull of her freighter with a ferocity that made the ship shudder like it had a life of its own. Warnings blinked across the console, flashing red glyphs that seemed almost playful, like they were daring her to panic. Lyra's fingers danced across the controls, coaxing the ship through the maelstrom. "Easy, Mirek," she muttered to the AI hovering in the cockpit as a soft blue hologram. "I get it. You hate surprises too." The storm was uncharted, moving faster than anything on the station's maps. Plasma arcs licked the void, and space debris drifted unpredictably, threatening to tear the hull apart. Lyra's heart raced as she calculated each movement. One wrong turn, one misjudged current, and the freighter would be shredded. Then, through the storm's chaos, a shadow appeared, an enormous floating station, ancient and impossible, hovering like a relic forgotten by time. Its surfaces glowed faintly with energy lines, and strange, spiraling towers curved upward into the storm. Lyra swore under her breath. "Well, that's convenient," she said. "Mirek, hold position. We're going down." Landing was delicate. Gravity was faint but cooperative, and the freighter shivered as it settled on a wide platform that should not have existed. Lyra checked her hands, then her instruments, then her hands again, just to make sure she hadn't imagined it. Outside, the air was sharp and metallic, with a strange floral undertone that made her stomach twist in confusion and awe. She stepped out of the airlock and onto the platform, her boots clicking against smooth metal etched with glowing symbols. Each step seemed to awaken the surface, light following her in polite lines. She looked around. Figures stood in a circle, tall and still, with subtle alien features. Lyra froze. One figure in particular drew her attention, a woman with long, tapered ears and wings folded elegantly behind her back. Her dark eyes seemed to pierce through space itself. "You have entered the station," the woman said, voice carrying over the open platform without effort. "The bond recognizes you." Lyra swallowed. I can leave," she said, gesturing toward her ship. "I'm really good at leaving. I do it all the time." A man stepped forward, wings flaring with sudden intensity. Words formed directly in Lyra's mind: accusation, intrusion, theft, betrayal. The station translated intent faster than speech. The air seemed to hum with tension. The woman raised a hand, and silence spread like liquid across the platform. "Peace," she said calmly. Lyra blinked. "That's optimistic," she muttered. The woman, High Steward Syrah, lifted chains of shimmering metal from the platform. They floated without effort, alive with soft internal light. "The first to cross the threshold becomes bound," she explained. "By choice, not force." Lyra laughed, incredulous. Back home, the first person to cross a threshold usually just gets yelled at for not knocking. Syrah's expression flickered, almost amused. "Refusal would unmake what the bond is meant to secure," she said. Thunder rolled far above the clouds that surrounded the station, and Lyra realized she had not even noticed how high she had flown. The chains hummed gently, responsive to the mood of the moment, and Lyra felt herself pulled slightly forward, not by gravity, but by the expectation of the station itself. "I don't understand any of this," Lyra admitted. "But if you want peace, I can try to help." Syrah's eyes studied her carefully. "You believe error absolves consequence." "I believe error explains it," Lyra said. "Absolution would just be a bonus." The circle of winged figures murmured, a sound like wind rustling through feathers. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. She had walked into something much larger than herself, an ancient system of law and balance that spanned centuries. Over the following hours, Lyra learned how to navigate the station. Corridors twisted in impossible ways, guided by currents she could sense with the small device Syrah had placed on her wrist. It projected invisible flows and eddies, allowing her to read the station like she would a map or a trading route. Every step required attention, every movement carried consequence. Lyra realized she was not just exploring the station, she was participating in its very life. Each action, each decision, sent ripples across the currents. Then, chaos erupted. A winged figure dropped from above, wings tight, intent lethal. Lyra reacted instinctively, lunging forward to shield Syrah. The attacker struck the spot she had just vacated, and the chains around Lyra's wrists hummed, responding to her intent. The stability field protected her, and the assailant was pinned by the guardians who had once been silent observers. "You shielded me," Syrah said quietly, once the attacker was removed. "Reflex," Lyra replied, heart still hammering. "I once dropped a crate on a customs officer. Ever since, I try to catch things." Syrah's gaze lingered, curious and unreadable. "The bond responds to choice," she said. "It tightens to fear, loosens to intent." Lyra nodded slowly. "I intend very strongly not to get skewered today." Syrah allowed a small smile. For the first time, Lyra felt she could breathe. In the following hours, she was guided through the ceremonial chambers, learning the principles of balance and law that governed the station. The winged figures moved around her with precision, yet there was no malice, only curiosity, observation, and cautious patience. Then, the rival from earlier returned, wings flaring and intent hostile. The Hall of Currents recognized them, the symbols on the floor brightening to mark the trial. Lyra understood. She was being tested, not for strength or skill, but for judgment. "I'm not from here," she said aloud. "I don't fly. I don't know your laws the way you do. But I know trade, routes, and how to prevent things from collapsing under pride and error." The rival scoffed. Lyra stepped into the unfolding light maps of the station, rearranging paths, adding redundancies, and creating shared corridors to prevent single points of failure. Her human experience in logistics became her strength. Finally, the hall stilled. Judgment fell not on her, but on those who had been rigid. The rival left, wings folding in silent disbelief. Syrah approached Lyra. "The bond stands. By choice, not accident." Lyra exhaled. "Does that mean I won?" "You reframed the right," Syrah said softly. "You have responsibility." Lyra laughed. "I knew there'd be a catch." The chains pulsed gently, warm and content. Lyra leaned against the platform, looking over the station. Paths opened where storms had once threatened, and she realized something profound. She had found a place where she could belong, not by power, but by choice and understanding. "I choose to stay," she said finally, softly, deliberately. "Not because I must, but because I want to see where these routes lead." The station hummed approval, and Syrah's wings rustled in relief. The storm had passed, and for the first time in years, Lyra Kane felt at home. Lyra Kane awoke to the hum of the station vibrating softly beneath her, the chains that had once bound her now resting quietly at her sides. Sunlight, or what passed for sunlight in the drifting plasma clouds, filtered through the translucent ceiling, shifting in colors she had no names for. The floating station seemed alive, breathing with her in quiet rhythm. She swung her legs over the edge of the sleeping platform and took a cautious step onto the floor. It pulsed faintly, almost like it remembered the choices she had made. High Steward Syrah stood nearby, wings partially unfurled, observing her without expression. "Morning," Lyra said, rubbing her eyes. "Do these clouds ever sleep, or is it just me?" Syrah inclined her head slightly. "The currents rest when the station deems it safe. You, however, have no such luxury." Lyra blinked. "Meaning what exactly?" "The corridors are restless. The station tests its stewards continuously. You are recognized, but not yet integrated." Integration. The word made Lyra's stomach tighten, like the knot before a storm. She had survived the trial, reframed the bond, but now it seemed the station itself would not let her simply exist. She had to prove she could participate in its life, not just navigate its paths. Syrah gestured to the balcony. Below stretched a lattice of floating platforms, bridges, and towers, twisting in impossible geometries. Figures moved along the currents, wings slicing through the air with precise arcs. Lyra followed the motion with her eyes, noting how energy flows threaded every structure, like veins in a living organism. "Your first task," Syrah said, "is observation. Learn the currents, not with eyes, but with understanding. Notice disruptions. Track movement. Anticipate friction." Lyra frowned. "Friction. I'm good with piloting ships, not energy currents in some ancient floating station." Syrah's expression did not change. The station will adjust. Your understanding will adjust. But only if you participate willingly. Participation. Lyra swallowed. She had chosen to stay. She could not back away now. The first hours were bewildering. Lyra walked along bridges that flexed slightly under her weight, instinctively adjusting her pace. The small device Syrah had placed on her wrist projected subtle currents, invisible flows that twisted and eddied through the air. She realized the currents were not static, they responded to intention, fear, hesitation, and courage. A sudden vibration along her device startled her. A small shard of plasma had broken from a distant storm cloud, drifting toward the station. Lyra reacted instinctively, waving her hand, guiding the shard into a harmless drift corridor. The currents pulsed in approval, warm and encouraging. Syrah's voice echoed softly behind her. You are learning faster than expected. Most stewards take weeks to respond instinctively. I've spent my life navigating impossible things, Lyra replied. Ships, cargo, people, mostly people. They're less predictable than plasma storms. Syrah tilted her head slightly, the first sign of amusement Lyra had noticed. Your human methods are crude, yet effective. The bond responds to intent, not form. Lyra laughed softly. Well, that's comforting. I can't polish form, but intent is my specialty. Later, she encountered her first test of diplomacy. A small group of winged guardians blocked a bridge that connected two major platforms. Their wings were folded tightly, and their eyes sharp as obsidian. Lyra's device translated intent, and she understood. These guardians were testing her authority, challenging her recognition as steward. I'm Lyra Kane, she announced, stepping forward. I've been chosen by the bond. I don't know all your laws, but I do understand cooperation. The lead guardian's eyes narrowed. The translation pressed into Lyra's mind: intrusion, disruption, arrogance. She took a deep breath. I am not your enemy. I am learning. If you allow me passage, I will observe, assist, and respect your paths. If I fail, I will accept the consequences. The currents shifted around her, warm lines rippling along the bridge. The guardians tilted their heads slightly, their wings unfurling just enough to reveal subtle patterns in feathers, scars, or decorations that seemed to signify rank. After a tense moment, they stepped aside. Syrah appeared beside Lyra, voice quiet. You handled that well. Observation coupled with humility ensures survival. Lyra exhaled. Observation is easier than surviving when everyone is armed with intent and feathers. By midday, the station had fully integrated her into its rhythms. She was learning to anticipate energy flows, not just see them. A minor tremor along a distant bridge signaled tension, a disagreement between two clusters of winged guardians. Lyra approached cautiously, observing, translating, thinking. The dispute centered on control of a corridor connecting the station to an outer docking platform. One faction claimed traditional right, another argued for current efficiency and safety. Lyra realized the stalemate could escalate into injury or worse. May I suggest an alternative? She asked, stepping into the shifting currents. The wings turned toward her, curiosity flickering. Instead of choosing one path over another, we distribute responsibility. Shared oversight, rotating control. Redundant corridors. If one fails, the others maintain stability. The guardians shifted uneasily. Tradition versus innovation. Pride versus efficiency. Lyra pressed on. Back home, empires fall not because one person fails, but because no one plans for error. The station can survive dispute if redundancy is honored. Syrah watched, silent. One faction leader hesitated, then stepped back. Slowly, the currents adjusted, the flow of energy acknowledging the proposal. Lyra felt the station pulse in approval. Human intuition is remarkable, Syrah said. Your logic and your willingness to accept risk without arrogance allow the bond to operate at full potential. Risk without arrogance, Lyra muttered. I like that phrase. Can I put it on a t-shirt? Syrah's wings rustled faintly. Focus on stewardship, not merchandising. The afternoon brought a more dangerous challenge. A rogue current broke off from the plasma storm outside, striking a peripheral platform with tremendous force. Objects and debris began spinning into the Hall of Currents. Lyra's device flared, warning her of unstable paths. Without hesitation, she ran along a bridge, arms outstretched, using the currents to stabilize the spinning debris. She guided shards and objects into safe corridors, her human instincts for navigation proving more precise than the station's automated adjustments. Syrah followed silently. You act with purpose, yet without reckless ambition. That is rare. Lyra grinned through wind and vibration. I don't have ambition. I have stubbornness, experience, and the ability to panic effectively. Usually works out. The station pulsed in response, warming along the bridges where she had passed. Currents aligned more smoothly than before, demonstrating that her intervention had improved circulation rather than merely reacting to chaos. Evening brought reflection. Lyra stood at the edge of the station, watching the plasma cloud swirl below and above. The currents were gentle now, almost playful. She realized she had learned something profound. The station did not merely respond to physical action. It responded to intention, morality, and the ability to adapt. Her human imperfections were her greatest strengths. Syrah joined her, wings catching the dying light. You have grown quickly today, she said. Tomorrow will test judgment, not action. Lyra glanced at her. Judgment. I already handled rogue currents, disputes, and attempted murder by feathered assailant. How bad can judgment be? Syrah's eyes were steady. Worse than all of that combined, yet easier if you understand balance. Balance. Lyra remembered the word from her first landing. She had thought it meant survival. Now she realized it meant understanding relationships, currents, intention, and consequences. Every choice mattered, not just for her, but for everyone the station touched. Night arrived in drifting pulses of energy. The station did not sleep, but the currents slowed, dimming in a rhythm that mimicked rest. Lyra sat on the balcony, legs dangling over empty air, listening to the distant hum of platforms moving above and below. Syrah joined her again. Do you understand why the bond required choice? Lyra nodded slowly. Because without choice, intention is meaningless. Without intention, actions are empty. Syrah inclined her head. Correct. You have demonstrated understanding. Yet tomorrow you will face the greatest test, the trial of decision. The trial of decision. Lyra repeated, uneasy. What does that even mean? You will be presented with a scenario that forces immediate choice. Every current, every path, every guardian, and every faction will respond to your decision. You cannot see consequences clearly. You must act from understanding, not certainty. Lyra swallowed. She had survived storms, disputes, and rogue attacks, but the idea of facing an entire station's judgment on a single choice tightened her chest. Good, Syrah said, for judgment without consequence is meaningless. You will learn humility as well as power. Lyra exhaled slowly. Humility. I'm full of that. Mostly by accident. Syrah allowed a faint trace of amusement to ripple across her face. Tomorrow, the station will decide if it can trust you fully. If it cannot. Lyra let the words hang. She did not want to imagine failure. The night passed with strange serenity. The station pulsed softly, like a heartbeat beneath her feet. Lyra drifted in uneasy sleep, dreams filled with shifting currents, guardians watching, and pathways forming and unforming beneath her boots. When she awoke, the first tremors of the trial had begun. Across the station, corridors swirled with urgent energy, signaling disputes and dangers arising simultaneously. She checked her device. Currents were chaotic, guardians were in motion, and the outer docking platforms had begun to drift from alignment due to residual plasma activity. This is it, she whispered. Time to see if I can really do this. Syrah appeared, wings unfurled like an invitation rather than a command. Your choice will not be easy. Observe. Act. Accept. Lyra nodded, heart pounding. The currents waited, the station pulsed, and the future of Zoria Station lay in the hands of a human navigator who had survived storms, guardians, and impossible bonds, not by strength or knowledge, but by adaptation, courage, and understanding. With a deep breath, she stepped forward.